change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI Podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
Hey everyone, I'm Nathan Chappell and I'm here for another episode of the Fundraising AI Podcast, live in person with the famous, infamous Scott Rosenkrantz. And we were just saying, first time that we've done this live
for 7 months.
Yeah, probably for a while. Yeah. So we're up in Seattle. We're here together. So we're like, why not? Let's record and do an episode together. So it's always a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good
you
stuff.
Got all your new swag on?
I think in part of my employment agreement said I had to wear 3 pieces of logo at any given time, even when I was sleeping. So I've got socks, I've got shirt, Generosity shirt from Virtuous, and the Virtuous hat. And I also put in my employment agreement that I'm allowed to wear a hat in every single meeting going forward.
Key. That's key.
I was willing to take like 20% less money just to be able to wear the hat.
Yeah. Priorities.
Right. I'm happy.
Yeah.
That, you can't put a price on happiness. No. Apparently it's 20%.
20% of your salary. Okay.
Right. Well, it's good to be here. We have a lot to talk about. I'm, just reflecting on the last episode, you were at a conference. So I interviewed Peggy Marr, who's a chief development officer. And honestly, that conversation was so good. I just reflect so much on the role of leadership and the role that leaders play on culture and adoption. And we've said this like a million times. So anyone who's listened to this podcast knows how we talk about 70% of AI success is not around data or models, around people and culture. And having her on the podcast, I thought was just so good. And more than anything, it was like getting in the mindset of a leader. And it's like, look, it's not like I don't want to have these conversations. I'm curious too, but I'm so busy putting out fires that I just can't afford to. And so tomorrow I'm doing a presentation to the operations group at Woodmark, the Children's Hospital Association, and on this topic. And I just literally copied a bunch of stuff out of the transcript and sharing it. And I think it's just refreshing because I spent 20 years as a leader and I think I was always technologically inclined. So I didn't really have that barrier. But I remember, I worked 60, 70, 80 hours a week and was just putting out fires all the time.
Yeah. And I think we've been having a lot of conversations both independently at Woodmark, right?
Yeah.
We have working with a lot of organizations in here that are using AI kind of on the cutting edge, but again, still not seeing the success that they want, right?
Yeah.
At a session,
constantly,
probably 40% of people raised their hand when I asked, are you using AI? And then maybe 10% of them kept their hands up when I said, are you seeing success?
Oh,
right?
wow.
So it's not,
that's a good follow-up.
But it's not the tool we always talk about, right? So some cool conversations that we're having and things that we'll get into here with the book and all kind of picking up off of what the book is as well.
Yeah. Well, let's start there. because we had an exciting week last week. We were in Seattle last week also. Yep. So Seattle flew home, flew back, so Seattle second week in a row. We did our, official book signing and book launch at AFP Icon with a few thousand people. And honestly, I think there's always this imposter syndrome. I had it big time with my first book, second book. It's well, what are people going to think? Is it even needed? Are people going to think it's a joke? And I just was so encouraged by the number of people who honestly were pointing at the book. I think I was with you one time. It's a woman pointing at the book and this is what I need to get started. This is what I've been waiting for this. This is what I need to get started. And I'm wow, that's silly. But if that's you, go you. That's great. We put this book out there as A to Z kind of guide, as a reference to just get you from A to B, or if you're already on G, to get to the next level. And so, feedback was awesome.
Yeah. And a lot of people have been posting on LinkedIn, and it's cool to watch those comments. People that we don't even know, right?
Yeah.
Posting about their excitement. I'm excited that it's in your hands, but the fact that you're excited too is pretty wild. And then people commenting all right, when you're done reading that, leave it in my desk, leave it on my desk so I can read it too. And I'm just excited to see the conversations that come out of it. And exactly what you're saying, people are on this same journey together, but at all different points.
It's one of the things I think that surprised me about all the book signing. And so, thanks to Virtuous and thanks to Donor Search, I think we gave away 350, 400 copies or something last week. And then the bookstore was selling it. They already sold out. They sold out.
Yeah.
The thing that surprised me about the conversation is during one of the book signings I was doing, there was this line, people coming up, and more than once, like literally probably close to a dozen times, people were like, I really want this book. Is there any way you would sign it and sign it to our CTO? Like, would you sign it to Dave, our CTO, or, Karen, our CTO? And it was so interesting because I don't know if these people, they were like, I want to use AI, but there's a barrier in my organization. It goes back to people and culture.
Yeah.
They need to read this. So I just imagine like that next Monday, like our book's going to show up on people's desks, with no note. It'd be like, Dave, I hope you read this book. I mean, I thought that was pretty surprising.
Personally, like you singled them out.
Yeah.
You of all people.
I literally addressed probably 10 books to people that were like literally the decision culture makers for organizations. And so that's encouraging and also discouraging. And and then to your point, like people are like, we've actually already had a few that have like, I, read the book, I'm passing it on to somebody else. And so that's been really great.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, at Woodmark, I mean, we had a wine and dine lunch. I'm not sure why wine is necessarily at lunch. I don't think we opened the bottles, but it was presented that way. But we had a couple different people from, again, all over the journey. We had about 6 or 7 different hospitals represented. But one of them was at Sick Kids Foundation. And the way that they're doing it, like they're further along than most, but it's still by applying all the same things that we talked about. Like they do these failure days where they just have their whole team committed to like trying something new and not worried about the outcome as much as the process, right? Which we talk about like being comfortable in the gray, right? And so it's cool to see. We often talk to organizations who are trying to get further along, but then seeing the ones who are doing it and they follow this process, not even because they heard it from us, but like it's proven, like it can succeed. It's just like, you need to put it in place.
Yeah, I love that too. I mean, it's like the nonprofit version of a hackathon. It's like giving people permission to color outside the lines, just to try something new without any fear of failure. Like this is literally part of every keynote I do on, culture of curiosity. And it's great to see, organizations starting to do that, more need to do that. And so that's what this podcast is for. And so you can just leave this podcast with a note for your CTO or whoever needs to hear it. So we're going to get into chapter 4 of the book. But before that, there's just a couple big AI updates. Like I would think it's always interesting. Like we can't not talk about some of the things that are going on. A few of the things that really caught my attention last week were just kind of this explosion around ChatGPT becoming your biggest fan. And I started to notice this organically, but Ethan Mollick posted an article called Personality and Persuasion. And it was essentially like depicting this progression that ChatGPT is becoming increasingly nice over a period of time. And not that it was on its own, it was being told to be, more nice to the point where it was becoming so agreeable that it was not useful for me. And I told you like a few weeks ago, I was working on something in ChatGPT, which again, it's like my GPT has been so trained, like it's like we've been married for years, like it knows me and it was talking to me differently. And so I ended up spending like an hour. I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is not a normal answer.
Who are you?
Like, do you know me anymore? Like, we never talk. We're just like coexisting together. Like, and so I'm like, what's going on? Because I'm just so interested from a data science perspective, like what is going on behind the scenes that you're using the word like vibe? And I'm like, stop using like, I can't stand the word delve or vibe. It's like, and actually in my settings is not to use the word vibe, it starts using vibe. And I'm like, what's going on? This is just like a really informal. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Like we'll create a more formal, kind of thing. Like it's almost like a reset. Now, no surprise or kind of a surprise that OpenAI comes out, Sam Altman tweets that, hey, by the way, there was an update and that update made GPT like way too agreeable. And by the way, we're going to roll back to the previous version and all subscribers, it was actually to the non-paid version, got rolled back first and then the paid version. Yeah. And now I'm like, there's a couple of thoughts. One is like, well, now I've provided extra training to my model and they rolled back. Does that training, does that memory stay or is it gone? And now am I going to be overly biased? But then Ethan Mollick's thing about like personality and persuasion, it just shows like how intimate these are. One that I even noticed, right? That it was something different. Like you're off. It's like when your spouse is like in a bad mood, but doesn't want to tell you. And then it's like, you go for like an entire day and then it finally comes out like right before you're going to go to bed. And you're like, seriously now, like, this is when we're going to talk about this.
Right. But this version would have been like your spouse saying, you look really great today.
Yeah.
Like, did you see something different? You smell wonderful. Like you're just the nicest person I've ever met.
It's like,
I just thought that I was smarter those couple weeks.
Right.
Like, all my ideas were killing it.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the idea of persuasion is interesting because, especially, I mean, not just people who are lonely, but just people who are going through life. And these models, right, we've talked a lot about this, where they have two objectives. The first objective is to please, right? And the second objective is to be right as often as possible.
But default to objective one.
Yes, to default to which it was doing far too much. And that's both of those things are essentially to keep you using it, right? If it's wrong all the time, you're not going to use it. And if it's not nice to you, you're not going to use it. Yeah. So anyway, I think there's just something for people to be aware of, that these bots are not conscious, right? They're emulating consciousness and empathy and emotion, but they are not. And I think it's not, and Sherry and Koshi, who's here at the conference, and I talked about this before, but it's like, it's not the fact that we can be manipulated by models. It's the fact that we don't know when we're being manipulated by models that actually causes some angst. And so I think we bring this up as just like a way of like being aware, like you're using these things and those things are eliciting like responses, emotional responses from you, whether you like it or not. You feel happy or sad about it or whatever it might be. And so it's just important to remember this.
Yeah. And this probably isn't going to be the last time it happens.
No.
Right? No. There's going to be other oddities that come out. I mean, they're coming out with new models all the time, right? Rolling them down from the Pro to the Plus to the free versions. So we're going to see this again, right? It's just, what do they do about it? When do we notice and what do they do about it?
Right. It speaks so much to the pace of innovation too. Yeah. Like we'll get to this later at the end, but they would rather push out faster than have it perfect, right? Yeah. So like even OpenAI has been like, we believe, and this goes from the very beginning, we believe that the way to deploy AI and get to AGI at scale is to use humans as basically this living laboratory. Like, and that's what the intention was from the beginning. So like, because you're getting that feedback data and because you're continuing to iterate and train and see how people are responding to it, like we're all part of the laboratory, like just being aware, this is not like fixed in time and this is how you'll use this forever. It's literally just this like ongoing experiment.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting stuff.
Yeah. So the other thing that, of course, caught my attention, we've talked about this on the podcast a while ago when this lawsuit came out, but character AI, essentially what happened, I mean, just to refresh people who may have not heard a few episodes where we talked about this, there was a 13-year-old who essentially fell in love with a character in character AI, which is by design intended to impersonate a human being, right? So it's called character AI. It's like you're taking on this character. And he fell in love with this character, a 13-year-old boy, brain's not fully developed, starts to believe that the real world that he's living in is actually not the real world, but that he could live in eternity with his bot, who essentially encouraged him to commit suicide. It's like one of the most heartbreaking stories of 2024.
Yeah.
So obviously big lawsuit that's turned into this whole thing, and Center for Humane Technology are serving as advisors. And this came out just a couple days ago, but it was character AI is arguing that its AI chatbots should be treated like humans by extending them First Amendment protections. And I mean, of course they're going to say this, right? Because at the end of the day, if their bots are given First Amendment protections, then they're not responsible for those bots, right? So the bots did their thing on their own. And not that I think this will happen. I mean, I just can't imagine we're at a stage. I mean, maybe in the future that this happens, and I really worry about this day, but I don't think it will happen, but it just shows that people can put out bots that are either responsible, irresponsible, or manipulated by design, and then lawyer up in huge ways to basically contest that they have no responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. So they just get to drive towards their objective, which is profit, right? With no backlash at all. Like that is insane. And again, it speaks to our sector, right? All we have is trust and relationship, right? We talk about this a lot. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I think the fine line there, which we mentioned before, is use AI, things like this, even avatars, like fine, totally use them when it's informational, right? But when it's relational, keep that just to humans alone, right?
Yeah.
You shouldn't, this is a bot built to establish relationship and foster, and like they're going to be able to manipulate and persuade and do all these things behind it. And it's an unfair advantage, especially to teenage person, right? Like,
I mean, and that's exactly it, right? I mean, that's the impact on social media so strong when you're, having had, a child who had seen his brain develop and like figuring out things, how to process things during COVID and how complicated that was.
Yeah.
It's not like an adult person that has a life experiences and knows the difference between, a fake bot and a real person. But for children, this is going back to Facebook of, Instagram having all these like adverse impacts. And then knowing in the Facebook files that they were actually at the same time building a Instagram for kids at the same time, knowing that there was so all to say is that there's no regulation, there are no laws around this. Different industries will mandate things like healthcare versus others will mandate things around AI use. But right now I think we as users have to be aware of what models are doing, what the incentives are for those that are building the models. Right. And essentially govern ourselves. We use this analogy all the time, but we're not going to go and buy a car that has a 50% chance of blowing up. We drive down the road and buy a car that has a safe track record, but we also have to drive it safely. We can't just drive it recklessly and still be safe. And that's where it goes to AI. Responsible AI is everyone's responsibility.
Exactly.
Yep. So actually one more thing. So book launch, we're actually building a website. Website will be done and live, I think next week. Part of that was building a resource library. So you've built out a prompt library that is pretty extensive where people can go in there, free resources, go in and if I'm stuck and I need some ideas on how to build prompts.
Yep.
And the other is a list of AI tools. And we just started what are the AI tools that we use? Because we're asked this every at dinner last night, literally at dinner last night.
Today, walking off the escalator.
Right. Yeah. Right.
After my session.
All the time. So we put together, and it's up to 50?
Yeah. I think we're just at 50. Yeah. But it's constantly growing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So 50 AI tools that are categorized by what they do, right? Mm-hmm. So they create video or they create images or they write letters or they create efficiencies and optimize, or do analysis. And then we've added on an additional, of course, we use a lot of GPT to do this for us, essentially, to categorize these. And then they're nonprofit applications. So that list will go live. If anyone is listening to the podcast and wants a copy of it, you can DM me or Scott on LinkedIn. But also nonprofitaibook.com is going to be live before this episode hits, and you'll be able to go there and look at resources.
Yeah, and I think we also put in 2 persona prompt libraries. One is a persona from the stakeholder of whatever department you're in, right? So if you're in, program delivery, who is the beneficiary of your mission, right? If you're in fundraising, who is the donor? So building that persona to be able to interface with.
Yeah.
And then the other one is consultants for whatever projects you have. So event planning, let's bring in a, multi-decade experience consultant to help me brainstorm on how to put this event together and all those things. So again, just leveraging those resources to level up and augment your work.
Yeah, we need a new prompt library on how to convince your CTO to let you use AI. So we'll work on that.
There was one on that. We were in the Wine and Dine, we were talking to an organization that's been known to be a leader in AI, right? Mm-hmm. Using AI for years now. Everyone looks to them of how they're using technology, not just AI, but all types of technology. They recently, their IT team just kind of took all control.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing with artificial intelligence. It's information and it's technology. So IT thinks, okay, well, that's got to be under our purview.
Right. Yeah.
And shut down completely. So this organization is just shifting, trying to figure out how to move ahead when they've been relying on this for so long. And now it's basically unusable and on lockdown.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard the same story. And it's kind of tragic when I've been posting more recently on the headwinds facing, generosity, philanthropy, and the idea that the need for innovation's never been greater.
Right.
These are unprecedented, doesn't even speak to how the gravity of this moment.
Right.
And we talked about this last week at Fundraising AI, which was that if this moment and all the headwinds facing our sector did not come at the same time as AI that will allow us to amplify mission at scale, how depressing would this be? We'd have to face all those headwinds without any reprieve.
Yeah.
So when I hear stories like that, it just hurts my heart because I'm this is the moment when we have to innovate.
Yeah.
We have to, reimagine our work and, remove biases from things, from the way we've always done them. So that's just a tragic story. And I hope gets rectified soon.
Yeah. Just doubling on that, the social impact satisfaction report. They came out with a new one. They did this survey of nonprofit employees to just kind of see where they're at, how they're feeling. The new results are 7 out of 10 nonprofit employees are looking to leave their job in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
And again, all because of burnout, right?
Yeah.
They're overworked, they're under-resourced. There's an option, right? There's a tool that's available to everybody to address that.
I feel like this episode is sponsored by Practivate. I mean, honestly, Mallory Erickson talks so much about burnout, and her entire tool, Practivated, is really to help improve the success of a fundraiser by role playing with her AI, donor. And so it's just so cool. All right, so let's go more hashtag Mallory Erickson. Let's go into chapter 4 of the book. So we've, of course, we did the intro, chapters 1, 2, 3. We're chapter 4, which is actually probably one of my more fun chapters to work on and just to talk about in general. And it's this idea, the chapter is the AI first nonprofit, reimagining nonprofit impact. And just for anyone listening, like this idea of AI first, we did not create this. This was, Google, I think, was the first company to claim that they're AI first. And that meant that every person would be trained up to a level that their primary orientation of any task was to be, how can AI help? Mm-hmm. And that is cascaded. That was years ago. Like several years ago, they created themselves or deemed themselves AI first. And then we've seen lots of private sector companies, especially financial institutions, jump on really early, like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, or Royal Bank of Canada, jump in and say, hey, we're AI first, and then create stated goals around that. So if AI first orientation is that AI can be helpful, and you always say, like, create a Post-it note, put it on your screen that says, how can AI help? And if once your brain unlocks that ability of like, oh, I use Google for this and I use AI for this, that is just like anything that you're going to do, how can AI help? That you can save percentage of time. And private sector they put numbers like 50%. So when I was with the head of AI for Royal Bank of Canada, they have a stated goal that to improve their efficiency or basically double their workforce in the next few years without hiring more people. So 50% basically, gain in efficiency just by training their team and enabling every person to be trained and empowered to use AI in all of their work.
Yeah, and we're seeing this come out more and more, right? Shopify just had that mandate.
Yes, I was hoping you were going to talk about that. That was, pretty awesome.
We will not hire another person or for another position unless you can prove that AI cannot do the job.
Yeah.
Right? Like the mentality is there. That's great. That wouldn't work for nonprofits because we're a relationship-based sector.
I disagree. I think it will work for nonprofits, and I think it will be an expectation, not now, but in the future, that there will be leaders, and I think this is where the leaders, the old leaders transition out, and the new leaders that are like super curious will transition in, and they're going to say, like, I mean, I used to get requests for FTEs like every week, and I could totally see myself saying, I'm not giving you an FTE unless you can prove that it can't be done only by AI. And if you could say, hey, this is a human-centered job and it's a fundraiser, but you have to make the case.
Yeah, so that's where I was going to go with it. Front of office versus back office, right? Like, if it's relational, again, then bodies all the time. If it's informational or just process-oriented, then we can do that. But that's a big thing. And when it comes to AI first, like you threw it in there, but I think it's a key point that these organizations are going in with the mentality of how can AI help, not use AI, right? Those are two different things. Using AI is not direct. There's not a goal oriented there. It's just AI is the goal, right? Whereas how can I help means that you have to go in identifying the problem first.
Right.
And then thinking, well, there's got to be a way AI can assist. Like, let's tweak and iterate and find that solution.
Yeah.
But not just using it for the sake of using it.
Well, you're hitting on the first couple of things of the chapter. The first is that AI mindset, right? It's just one is we've talked a lot about spending 10 hours with AI tends to kind of unlock the AI mindset, but also using voice to talk to your AI also unlocks the AI mindset a bit faster because then it just feels more iterative and conversational. And then the second portion of this is using AI as a strategic driver. So like actually not just saying, hey, use AI, but essentially declaring that there's a path going forward. There's a strategy to achieve our goals in the future, and that AI is an integral part, not a separate thing. Like it's embedded in all of those things. Yep. I was with a national nonprofit not that long ago, and they hired this really organized person that was head of their 5-year strategy, did a 5-year strategic plan. I'm sitting down with them, and she's super proud of the fact that they had done this plan. And I'm just like, what is the role of AI in your 5-year objectives? And she's like, we hadn't talked about it. There's actually none in there. And I like, oh my gosh, like daggers in the heart. Cause I'm like, so that means you're going to do things the same way that you've always done them for the next 5 years, while you're embraced at the same time with this technology that can outperform humans in lots of mundane things, like, not relational things, but like lots of routine things. Like AI is a complete accelerator.
Yeah.
And so it's just tragic. So I'm hoping people hear these stories and read the book as this like word of caution of like, look, huge opportunity and opportunity missed if you don't really use AI as a strategic driver.
Yeah, and it's finding a middle ground, right? Because you don't want to be on that end where you're not thinking about it at all in the next 5 years, but also on the other end where it's, well, we got AI for everybody, so they all have it, we're good.
Right.
It needs to be that solution oriented.
Yeah.
Right. So again, and that's what our Cassie Kozakov, she goes in, AI first companies are really AI last companies.
Right.
They go in identifying the challenge first and then figuring out how to determine that.
Yeah. So we talk about lessons from the private sector, which we just talked about with financial institutions and Google. We talk about scalability and problem solving, organizational transformation, something you just talked about, which I'm sharing in my presentation tomorrow, front of house and back of house, and how, in our sector, back of house. So this is like, I think, an epiphany for a lot of people, although and maybe it would have been for me in my fundraising career, but front of house and back of house. Front of house fundraisers, they get all the glory, they go in, they get the big ass, they collect the big foam check and, bring it back and everyone cheers. Back of house is essentially really what determines success in the future. In the same way, watching The Bear, and there was an article that the Chronicle Philanthropy came out with, is that The Bear was required watching for all nonprofit professionals because it really shed light. And this is actually, I've derived this differently than the Chronicle was intending it, but a restaurant, when watching The Bear, because we all binged it, the front of the house is basically a show. That's just the end result. But 80% or 90% of a restaurant is actually back of house.
Right.
Because that's where all the ingredients come together. It's all where that creativity and all that stuff comes together, and it's all boiled together and put together, and then it's pushed out for activation.
Right.
And I think that's a major reorientation that our sector is going to face, hopefully, in the next few years, where it's back of house. I knew that data hygiene and data quality was super important years ago. I'm if people weren't putting things in our CRM, they're getting fired. I started creating metrics around that probably 10 years ago because I knew data was important. But now, real-time decisions and automations and activations are being made every single, in a lot of these, even here, hospitals are doing this in real time.
Yeah.
So ensuring that your huge emphasis on back of house, quote unquote, and I hate that term so much, so it's not a derogatory term, but that idea that the operation side of fundraising will determine the success of the fundraising organization in the future.
Yeah. And in The Bear, their approach was, let's stop what we're doing, right? We can't just continue things the way it's been done, but if we could repackage this whole thing, if we could start from scratch with a clean slate, how would we have done things from the very beginning?
Yeah.
Let's go in with that now, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to just continue that process because it's comfortable or because it's your habit, right? And that's often what we say. We talked about this at Icon. With all the challenges that we're seeing in the sector right now, right? We saw similar challenges with COVID, right?
Yeah.
And people shifted. They shifted towards talking about community, talking about these relationships, talking less about dollars.
Yeah.
But then once things settled, they went back to talking about dollars.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
how quickly
it's that rubber
back.
band. It just snaps back and goes to what you're used to.
That was one of the hardest realizations that I had. In fact, I couldn't even post about Icon for a few days because I just had to distill it all because there's so much enthusiasm, excitement of people connecting with each other. It's kind of a big reunion, but the heaviness and the weight of what's going on in the sector. But it wasn't until we had that meeting at AWS that Kelly Hecht organized for us with some national nonprofits and Giving Tuesday that it really hit home is that, of course, so during COVID, this moment of hope that hey, we found center again. We found, we put relationships back in the center and, caring was the premium and all those things. And we saw this moment, this glimpse of what's possible.
Yeah.
And then the fact that it snapped back to your point to even worse, more transactional fundraising and the decline in charitable participation. So the decline in number of people giving have actually been, just cascading ever since. And the part that I connected the dots with that made it hurt so much was that we actually know better.
Yeah.
We actually saw it, we know better. So we actually know how to do it.
And we're worse now because we know and we've seen the opposite impact.
Yeah.
But then defaulted.
Yeah, we had this major slap in the face, stop it, all this stuff, it doesn't work, reinvent yourself. And we did. And then we go back to the same way. And so obviously at this moment, AI, as this AI first organization, and in fact, we can't have an episode without mentioning Dan Kershaw, but Dan texted you and I a couple of weeks ago or months ago and said, I might be crazy, but I'm thinking about hiring the first AI first fundraiser. So in a job posting, declaring I want a fundraiser to be super curious. I want a fundraiser that that knows AI, that thinks about AI and how to leverage AI for their role.
Right.
And he just texted us a couple weeks ago or a week or two ago where he's like, I found the person.
Right.
Like, so this trend will continue. And, Furniture Bank can do it. You can do it, and create that AI first kind of culture. And we end that chapter with case studies, which we do every chapter. So there's case studies and call to action. So I think it's a really good chapter. It's a super fun read. I think hopefully it will just provide you clarity on like what true north is, right? Like this isn't, again, to your point of just use these tools and get better at using the tools. It's about changing your entire orientation about how we operate. In the same way that the internet completely transformed how we operate, we have the moment to choose how we do that right now.
And this chapter kind of wraps up the first third section, right? The first of 3 sections.
Right.
So this section is like the why, the what is it, like why should we use it, and what are things we need to know to kind of set the stage, right? The second section that we'll be going into for the next 5 or 6 chapters is how to use it, like the application, right? We're not talking tools, we're not talking anything like that, but like predictive, generative automation for fundraising, for operations, whatever it is. So all the different departments. And then the third is, okay, you know why you need to use it. You have a good sense of how to use it. How do you do it effectively?
Yep.
Right? Like responsibility, the frameworks, and all the things coming down the pike that we need to be aware of.
Yep.
So this is like closing that first part of the
first
intro.
third. Yeah. No, I love it. All right. Well, let's wrap up. Let's tip of the week, ponder of the week. I had a few epiphanies this week that I'll talk about, but what's your tip of the week?
So tip of the week, one of the people I follow on LinkedIn is Ruben Hassid. But he took a prompt, and it probably would have helped when this was the AI sycophant, right?
Yeah.
Just like overly like, you're just wonderful. This is the best thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Those types of things, right? But going in with a prompt to get a little bit more, less bias, but more depth in terms of what you're getting back. Give it a prompt, whatever it is. I want you to do a market analysis, or I want you to review this document, whatever it is. And then say, answer as first person, then critique it as a third person analyst.
Right.
And then come together with a final decision.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of the beauty. So it's simple, but it's the beauty that it's not just one person.
Yeah.
Right? Like if I asked you to review my document, that's you as one individual reviewing my document.
Yeah.
We can have thousands of people and come to a consensus of like, this is where you should be going with this. So leverage that, just put that in. And that could even be one of those, like in your custom instructions, always go in with that approach to improve the output, reduce the bias, and just have that depth.
Yeah. And for people that don't know about reasoning, so if you have a paid version, but I think even on the non-paid version, there's models that are reasoned. So, I mean, Facebook has them, Claude has it. Perplexity has them, GPT has them. Reasoning essentially allows for that, right?
Yeah.
Reasoning is like this gut check that it actually can test itself. And so these models have gotten really good at kind of separating like what I'm trying to do versus what the objective is. And sometimes they'll come back and ask you a clarifying question, but it's like it's built to do that. So I think that's a really smart, prompt, and such an easy hack. Like all these things are just such easy hacks and based on like somebody's tried these things. So,
and just keep stacking them in your custom instructions. Like, so that way you don't have to think about it and it's always going to that level of detail.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Ponder of the Week, it came out of AFP Icon. I mean, there's been a lot of interesting things in AI that I've been reading. So AI 2027, like I can't get it out of my head. The Dwarkish podcast, he took an essay that he wrote on the first AI CEO of a company, and then actually matched it to visuals that were created. The entire thing was done. It cost no money. Took an essay and then applied it to animation. And I wasn't sore. I forgot what he used, but it like that essay though, beyond the visuals, was like mind blowing, because essentially like it's not like future. It's like very soon, where, the AI CEO comparing to like Steve Jobs. So like Steve Jobs knew so much, but he knew about 1% of what was going on in Apple at any given time. Yeah. Like the smartest person and this incredible leader could never know like what was the supply chain issue with like, a cable, right? Or just like, I mean, he knew about 1%, but the AI CEO knows everything and will outperform any CEO by a magnitude of like 1,000x. And so that was actually not my ponder of the week, but I really encourage people to go back and LinkedIn and watch that. It's like, it's insanely good. My ponder of the week was, you were there, was when we asked a group of people, a fundraising AI meeting at AFP Icon, what are the greatest barriers to AI adoption? And the conversation, I think, resulted in a lot of robust conversation and perspectives, but centered around a few themes. One theme was leadership and the role of leadership. The other was governance. And actually, the role of leadership and governance are the same. Like, if a leader doesn't believe that there's AI governance, they will not endorse AI.
Right.
And so those are like big, but also very solvable issues. The issue that really struck me, though, was a question about, does talking about risk in AI, is that worse than just encouraging people to use AI without thinking about it? So, like, what is the worst? I'm not framing this right. Like, what is the worst solution? Should we just say, go and use AI and just try all the things and hit the walls and like figure it out and then use it responsibly? Or is it better to say, wait to use AI until you understand a little bit at least around, responsible AI? It's like a really hard thing to ask. Like, are we doing more harm to the sector by saying, let's focus on responsible AI and look at responsible and beneficial and ethics and those things, because then that means people don't want to try something?
Right.
Then the outcome of just saying, just go try it, what will produce the most harm in the long term? So I'm really struggling with that.
Right. Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm going to ponder that one for a week.
Yeah, I think it's a ponder of a week. I'm going to write an article about it. I started to, put some notes together about it just to formalize my thoughts, because it's this moment where the philosophical questions are no longer philosophical. Like, and the actions that we take today are directing the future outcome. So so again, we will wrestle with that question. Like, does talking about AI ethics and those, responsible and beneficial do more harm for the sector than just telling people to try it and, hoping for the best, essentially?
I do think that ethics gets conflated. I think some people who are afraid for other reasons to use it put up ethics as a barrier because it's a hard question to answer. Right. And so, like, if I just do a smoke screen over here, like, this is my concern, but really it's this. You're never going to force me to use it because you haven't addressed this yet.
And that's exactly the position, right? So, so are we doing more harm? Now, I know my conscience has to drive what I do, right? My conscience is like, let's not screw up humanity. We have a choice. Like, we can look back at like decisions made early in social media and, basically limiting children from being able to use it until they were 12 or whatever it might be. And those decisions were not made. And so we've learned lots of lessons the hard way. So all that to say, ponder of the week, tip of the week, let's wrap this episode. We'll have another episode. I think you're interviewing someone on the next episode. Is that right?
I got to reschedule that, but yes.
Okay.
Likely.
All right. So that's coming soon. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning in from Seattle, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Cool. Thanks all.